tonight, 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 tonight. Blow the ceiling off the party to the moon. See my partner Joe's locking, ain't no telling what he on. Bitches up tonight. I you back, Joe's locking. Hey, welcome to the video. And I've been trying to avoid people spoiling this chapter of the One Piece. And by this episode, well, this chapter alone, when it came to trying to avoid all of this and avoid all of these spoilers, the One Piece is gonna be spoiled. When the show ends, not the show, when the chapter is coming to an end, it's gonna be spoiled. It really is. There ain't no ifs, ands, or buts. It really is. Because I don't know what it's called, before they translate everything, those type of chapters, back when they was doing that shit with Jujutsu Kaisen, when they were just leaking the before translations chapters came out, they did this with this chapter. I promise you, I was trying to avoid that. I was scrolling. I damn near had to stay on fucking TikTok and everything else just to avoid spoilers. And I've been waiting on GrandLineReview to do his basic review of it. So after all that happened, like I said earlier, a few seconds ago, it's gonna get spoiled. I feel like there's no precaution or anything like that. But I hope they take the right actions and as soon as people start trying to spoil it, they just take it out. And I don't see. I ain't gonna be. I did it to my friend once. I didn't spoil it. I lied and pretended like I was spoiling it, but I wasn't spoiling it. I remember back when Endgame was going on. I used to go to the library and hang with my friends. I remember when Endgame came out. I watched that on, what was it, Put Locker? I think it was Put Locker. And I watched Endgame on there. It was the cam version. Yes, I bootlegged it. I watched it on there, then I went to the library, and he thought I was going to tell him. I said the Hulk dies. Just to mess with them. They thought I spoiled it, but I didn't. And One Piece, I'm scared it's going to happen in One Piece. Because it's going on so long, and I don't see the point of. I don't see why people be spoiling it. I don't see why people be spoiling. I really don't. Some people don't mean to do it, but some people do. I want to get off my chest. So now we got this new GrandLineReview review. If I'm right, I do got chapters reaction video 1178. And 1177. I don't know about 77, but for sure I have 1178. So let's go to 1179 and I'll do the GrandLineReview video. It's 20 minutes. I got enough battery power. I don't know if you can hear me. Battery. Oh, let me see. I put my hair on. I know I have enough battery power footage. So yeah. Oh yeah, I do like this microphone. But yeah, other than that, let's get in this video and let's go.
Saint Emu Nerona, King of the World, has finally been revealed. His ability is the Devil's Fruit, his durability is questionable, and despite the overwhelming order on display in this chapter, Emu Nerona may actually be dying as we speak. So this chapter, it picks up exactly where we left off in chapter 1178, after Emu informs the elders that he would be leaving the whole...
I couldn't find it. Yeah, I couldn't find it.
Land, which is apparently even more significant than we thought. And we then enter a bit of back and forth between Emu and the elders. And one thing I love immediately is seeing this panel of the 4 elder stars with Saint Saturn's chair looking pretty lonesome and empty there. And then Figgle and Garling walks in separately. This is so simple, but it shows that Garling is not part of their group. Garling is his own entity. There has been a fracture, and the five elders are no longer a cohesive structure. And this is probably showing us the beginnings of why Saint Shepherd Jupiter in particular was worried about Figgle and Garling joining their ranks. And this fracture continues with their dialogue. Garling is essentially against everything that the other four elders suggest, and deciding with Emu's desires being a bit of a suck-up, you know? But I do really like Garling's sense of authority. From the very first moment that he revealed himself as one of the new elders, he has acted more or less like the boss of the other four, and after their failure on Orchid Island, I don't think they have a lot of room to argue with Garling. It would be one thing if this group had managed to keep everything perfectly under control during that arc, but they failed pretty miserably, and now they just need to sit there and take L after L until Garling makes a similar mistake, if indeed he ever does. Garling does say that the situation in the Holy Lands, the assumed attack, is now somewhat under control, thanks to Shamrock, which is a pretty huge Shamrock flex. To think that we had the five elders and even Emu present, as well as however many Holy Knights that were not sent to Elbaf, but it took Shamrock to become the trump card in this situation. And I guess that's just what happens when Oda makes a copy of Shanks. To live up to that design, Shamrock has to be a pretty big deal. And we're going to talk a bit about fate and destiny and inevitability and all of that in a bit, but the attack on Marijois, or maybe it's not an attack, but the burning of the Holy Land was yet another event where fate seems to have favored the Straw Hats. Were it not for this attack, Shamrock would have been on Elbaf during the child abduction incident, and I don't think that things would have worked out anywhere near as well had he been there. Garling also mentions that the starvation tactic is still in effect, which is referring to the strategy of the Revolutionary Army. During the Reverie invasion, the Sabo squad destroyed the food stores on Marijois, whilst the rest of the Revolutionary Army around the world are blocking, intercepting, and commandeering food from other nations that were supposed to supply the Holy Land. And I do wonder if juxtaposing these two events, the burning of the Holy Land and the Starvation Plan, is implying that the Revolutionary Army were the ones who attacked Marijois, / are still attacking present tense Marijois. I'm still not so sure about this myself. Up until now, the Revolutionary Army have not been involved in any sort of direct action like that. Their whole thing is that they inspire citizens of various kingdoms to rise up against their oppressors, and they send agents to assist that effort. Or they conduct small-scale hit squad
Notice how
did during the
flag had a dragon on it.
It is possible that the Revolutionary Army went up there to start an uprising of slaves, but I'm personally feeling that someone else is behind this. With that said, I love how Garling stated that what can leaders do when they can't even feed their own troops? After which point we immediately cut to complaining, lots of complaining from York, who cannot feed herself, and who is the personification of the entire starvation problem in the Holy Land. You may remember this, but in the SBS of Volume 113, Echiro Oda did say that every human has the potential to become a world noble. And the theory as to how this happens is the isolation of greed and discarding the other aspects of humanity, specifically reason. And that is why the greed aspect of Vegapunk dreamt of becoming a world noble and betrayed essentially themselves to do so. But Garling just said, what good can leaders do when they can't even feed their own troops? But at the moment, he can't even feed one of his most integral troops in York. And Garling also tries to reason with York by bringing up the fact that the original Vegapunk was working against the world government, and so York's efforts could be considered to be her penance. However, the problem with this is exactly what I just said. York is an entity that was engineered to lack reason, logic, and wisdom. Those aspects were all given to other satellites. So I actually don't know how effective Garling's words are with York, and if her greed isn't satisfied soon, then she may even start working against the world government, provided she can find a better option, or the illusion of a better option. The exact reasoning itself doesn't really matter. She lacks reason. And we do also see the Vegapunk Mother Flame in this chapter, and that is why I really appreciate York having a tantrum. Because right now, her insatiable greed is the only thing stalling the world government's access to effectively infinite energy.
Oh, so she's been eating the food.
They're gonna get it. And the most horrifying thing is that when they do get it, that energy source is going to be under the command of Figgle and Garling. He is the new warrior god of science and defense after all. And you may say, but man, on the internet, don't you think that Emu would ultimately have control over it? Well, yeah. However, this chapter has made me feel something quite unusual about Emu, which is a bizarre degree of sympathy for both him and the Elder Stars, specifically specifically because of this series of panels where the elders are stating, "Oh, great one, there will be consequences if you leave Pangaea Castle, please do not doing it." And it's not so much what they're saying, but the expressions on their faces. We have 5 faces here telling 5 different stories, but to me, a lot of them are conveying genuine grief. It's very unsettling the way that Oda has drawn them. I'm not used to looking at some of the most horrific antagonists in this world, knowing what they've done, but seeing them express this sort of, I guess, humanity. Particularly since humanity is something that they're actively trying to shed in their godhood beliefs. And I swear that Marcus Mars is actually on the verge of tears. And I don't know if this is going to be a controversial comparison, but to me, this feels like the Elder Star's equivalent of the Straw Hats watching the funeral of the Going Merry. They are looking at Imu as if he's about to die. And Imu's words...
What if Imu can't step... Well, I wouldn't say can't, more like can't stay off the Grand Line. What if Imu is tied to the Grand... As long as Imu is at the Grand Line, something is happening. I don't know what it is, but something is happening.
I think also reinforce this. He says that all of this was set into motion long ago, and that the Holy Land will be left in the hands of the elders. Almost as if he's reading out his own will. And despite how powerfully this chapter ended, I'm now thinking to myself, is Imu going to die right here and right now because of this action of leaving the castle? Because when he does arrive on Elbaf in the Abyssal Circle, he falls to his knees and coughs up what I would describe as a fair hunk of blood.
Or Imu can go off the island, but the longer Imu stays off the island, I wouldn't say the weaker Imu gets. And I already been spoiled on it, so I know y'all read the intro to the channel, but just for y'all's sake, just for the dumbasses who don't listen. I've been spoiled on what gender Imu is, and it is a he. Hold on, wait. If you don't want to get spoiled from this point forward, click off the video. So far, I know Imu is a he. Just in case you're in the back, Imu is a he. And I want to see what happens at the end of the chapter.
But we see him shaking and huffing, implying that this dude, he is not okay. And from all of my previous anime and manga experience, I know that when a character does this, it means that they don't have long left.
And also, I think that after 1180, I'm probably going to have to stop reacting to and watch. This is no disrespect to the anime creators and anime TikTokers and anime communities. This is no disrespect towards y'all, but I think after 1180, even though I really want to keep those reacting to, I want to. Where's it go? I want to stay true to the anime. I want to not get too deep into the theory, because I feel like once I get deep into the theories, I'll figure it out before it comes out. I think Oda also said that he doesn't listen to the watches, which I think he kind of do, but he doesn't really listen to theories, because I feel like that kind of brings it, like, other than them, like, for me, that kind of brings the joy out of watching a show when you have all these theories about these shows. It's like okay, it'll make sense. They're going towards that way. Okay. Then the show comes out, they go towards that way. It's like, okay. Then it happens episode after episode, and it's like, I know it's gonna happen because we theorize it. Now it's true. That's the one thing about being good at predictions or finding the patterns. It's harder to have fun. You know what I'm saying? And I know I got a big forehead. You shut the fuck up.
They're likely to go out with a bang by sacrificing themselves. And it's so weird, because if it wasn't for all of the twisted demonic imagery, this chapter, in isolation, kinda makes Imu feel like he's the good guy. He even has a bit of a heart-to-heart with Topman Walkiri directly, where he
No.
tells Walkiri to cast aside arrogance, idleness, negligence, and pride. And it's just like, mate, why is this guy who we're all supposed to hate suddenly giving inspiring speeches? And also having what I might describe as these pre-death flashbacks. You know, when an author makes you briefly look back on the life of a character to summarize it all before it ends. Which brings me to my favorite part of the chapter, which for the most part is nothing new. It's all stuff we've seen before. But Imu states that everything that led to today was inevitable, and we get an incredible montage of key One Piece figures, starting with Rox Dizabek confronting Imu in the Chamber of Flowers, but we then cut to the iconic opening page of the series, with Roger starting the Golden Age of piracy, followed by the birth of Shirahoshi just to reassert her importance, remembering that she not only possesses the power of the ancient weapon Poseidon, but she's also the modern incarnation of the Mermaid Princess that Joy Boy made a promise with. Then we also see a cool panel of Shanks, and we hear a report of him having stolen the Nika Devil Fruit before we moved to King Harold. And actually before, I said that we don't see anything new. That's a lie. We do. We see tons of new stuff. Because we are seeing all of these events from the perspective of Imu, either watching them unfold or being told about them. And after Harold, Loki follows, and it is stated that they discovered his identity as captain of the ship of giants that was attacking everyone from the fog, which does explain Loki's 2.6 billion buried bounty, because they did actually find out. Now, after knowing that, I would question how Imu did not know that Loki was the user of the Nidhogg fruit, but it doesn't matter. Right now, we also see the iconic Whitebeard death at Marineford, except again from Imu's perspective, and Imu was wondering, Whitebeard, bruh, why would you protect this Monkey D. Luffy? And then Blackbeard is of course mentioned. And at this stage, 2 years ago during the Paramount War, it appears that Imu did not know who Luffy and Blackbeard actually were. Maybe not actually were. He did not know their importance, because he does call them Monkey D. Luffy and Marshall D. Teach. However, Imu does eventually find out, because the most interesting and I don't know, I would describe it as kind of heartbreaking stuff happens on the next page, which is that we see an expanded version of the scene from chapter 908, where we ominously cut to the Chamber of Flowers and saw Luffy, Blackbeard, and Shirahoshi's pictures having been ripped up and stabbed, whilst Imu kept the photo of Vivi intact. And we now know what happened to bring Imu to this stage, and I will never ever look at this scene the same way again. As if I had to guess, then this would be around the point where Imu figured out that Blackbeard had inherited the will of Davy Jones.
I've got spoiled on how Imu looks, and I want to say I had made I know my lips are ashy. I made a theory or an idea, and the theory or idea was skip this video if you. I can't. To me to enter, if you want to, just put a timestamp of what to skip to. God damn, I got a big ass forehead. Fuck it. God damn. But the idea, I'm just saying idea. The idea was, what if in the past, and I just saw that little photo of Vivi. What if Vivi in the past life or former life or a different life, whichever you want to call it. What if Joy Boy and Imu were in a triangle love thing, and Princess Vivi was the point. And Imu probably, I wouldn't say got into his feelings as much, but it's more like Princess Vivi was the breaking point. When Princess Vivi decided to side, not marry, before anybody starts seeing relationship stuff, side with Joy Boy, because Joy Boy or Nika, whichever one came first. I'm just gonna say Joy Boy. Joy Boy wanted to go one way and Emu wanted to go another. And Vivi sided with Joy Boy, but Emu felt played, but kind of a little bit in his feelings. But he felt played by nobody siding with him. You know what I'm saying? Like, nobody siding with Emu, but everybody was siding with Joy Boy. And that made Emu feel some type of way. It was only when Vivi, or the reincarnation, or whatever you call it, in the form of Vivi, joins Joy Boy Nika's side. That's when the camel's back broke.
Luffy, the will of Joy Boy, because at this point he doesn't use their names anymore. Remember, during the Paramount War, he referred to them as Monkey D. Luffy and Marshall D. Teach, but here he refers to both of them just as Joy Boy and Davy Jones. Slicing up their bounties in a fit of anger, he states, "Will thou keep making Mu suffer?" And then the last panel of this montage is Emu looking lovingly at the portrait of Nefertari Lily, expressing his desire to retrieve Vivi. I don't know, in this
you know what's crazy? I can see Davy Jones being the teacher. Davy Teach Jones.
Context, it's a bit less creepy to me. It's
and
almost
Davy teaching Joy Boy.
It's almost as if he wants to save Vivi. Again, this chapter, it portrays Emu as quite sympathetic and almost the good guy. As if he's the one who's being tormented by Joy Boy and Davy Jones, those evil murders, his entire 1,000-year-long life, or however long it is that Emu's lived. And at the very least, from Emu's perspective, they are the bad guys, and it makes me infinitely more fascinated to get into that Void Century flashback. I've joked about this in the past, but I've often said that the existence of a Joy Boy may also imply the existence of a sad boy, and Emu is looking like a pretty perfect sad boy candidate in this chapter. But what strikes me is that the Emu in this chapter, he is nothing like the Emu that was possessing Gunko on Elbaf. There has been a complete personality shift, because all of those follies he told Walkuri to cast aside is exactly what he was practicing whilst possessing Gunko. Through Gunko, Emu was arrogant, negligent, idle, and proud. But now he shed all of that, and we are seeing who Emu really is for the very first time. And also what he really looks like, which we'll get to shortly though, because there's a ton of other stuff to get to first. And so in the brief bit of respite gained on Elbaf, we have managed to capture Saint Summers, so he's no longer at large, and Gert has been examining his body, with confirmation that Summers does indeed have a heart of steel, a literal steel heart. And I honestly feel quite vindicated here, because there were so many people last week telling me that I was crazy for thinking that this heart was metallic. It is specifically steel though, and I love that it's Zoro who poses the question of, I don't know, would Summers still be able to regenerate if this heart was somehow destroyed? Because Zoro, I do have an ability to cut steel, and generally if Zoro sees anything steel related, then he is going to suggest cutting it just to flex. And the reaction from Saint Summers would seem to confirm this idea that if you destroy the heart, he will no longer be able to regenerate. And I don't know if it's the same for the rest of the Holy Knights, if each of them have these hearts of steel, because at the very least we haven't found one in the chopped up parts of Killingham's body yet. But if so, then Zoro is the natural counter to each and every Holy Knight. And also Eustace Kid actually. Saint Summers, at the very least, would be pretty useless against him. This whole section of the chapter is very funny though. It's the classic Oda disarming us with comedy before smacking us with a big dramatic beat, making the drama hit harder because he lowers our guards just before. And I think my favorite joke from this section is Frankie offering to turn Brook and Usopp into cyborgs because their bones are...
I ain't lie, for me, the most funniest page so far at Elbeth is that page with Luffy and that goddamn squirrel.
broken, because that is exactly what Frankie did to heal himself after being hit by the sea train. It's not all jokes though, we actually have some very, very important information given to us by Loki, as Luffy asks whether or not people frozen by Ragnir's ice die, and Loki says no. However, they can only be thawed out by Ragnir. And this is the last thing I really needed to be extremely confident in saying, that the ancient Galileo giants on Punk Hazard were frozen by a previous wielder of Ragnir. And therefore, at some point, we are going to need to get Loki and Ragnir to Punk Hazard in order to free them. They're not dead, they just need to be unfrozen. And then they'll become the integral part of enacting whatever Rox Diesebek's grand ambition was. Anyway, that is the last piece of good news that comes out of this chapter, because from here on out, I don't know, I think we're pretty screwed. Because Emu's arrival on Elbaf is about as close as I think One Piece will ever get to something ripped straight out of Berserk, or maybe it's closer to Black Clover. But the enormity of this abyssal circle above Orist Castle is very, very hard to quantify.
My God. Imagine seeing this in One Piece. At this point, you know what? I'm gonna give it to him. I'm gonna say, you know what? I'm gonna give it to him. Usopp, I understand. At that point, it's like, come on. And this right here is my limit for Usopp. After this, I completely understand, because ain't no fucking way. I don't know. At one point, but Usopp, you gotta upgrade. Usopp, you gotta upgrade. Ain't no more slingshots. If you do slingshots, you gotta do them motherfuckers gotta be filled with hockey. They gotta be filled with hockey.
It looks big, but remember that this is no normal castle. This is a giant castle, and so the size of this circle could probably cover many entire islands in this world. And it comes equipped with these very sinister columns of, I guess, black flames. The whole image, it's quite overwhelming. Although I will say that Oda's paneling style might not be used to its best effect here, because I feel that this is the sort of shot that would really benefit from just being a full-on two-page spread, to really get into the scale of it.
Well, I would love to see a two-page spread.
Two-page spread that Oda likes to do, just for maximum impact of this moment. Although something rather surprising for me was that Emu's influence and or aura, it spreads through Elbaf, and as it does, the houses and the trees of the island start taking on these very cute demonic forms. Very, very similar to Big Mom creating homies with the...
And you know what, now you say that, I feel like we're at the end of the battle. We're in mid, or we're 3/4 done with the battle. Like we're not done with the battle yet, but we're getting there. But once we're done with this battle, it's a war. If this is what's actually that war the One Piece community been waiting for, that's big in Marineford, this is probably it. And I'm gonna keep on saying this until they leave Elbaf. This is Shanks's territory. Ain't no way all this is happening without Shanks. All this is ending without Shanks at least popping on that island.
Soul Devil Fruit, especially since they're all singing and dancing as well. But it's also eerily similar to what Luffy does with Gear 5th. When he awakens his Devil Fruit abilities, he is...
I can only imagine that's going to happen.
...to dance to the drums of liberation, further enhancing the idea of a sad boy while making Emu the antithesis of the powers of Nika. The singing did really throw me off at first, but it does make a lot of sense because it sounds like fanfare. You know that short musical flourish that would accompany the entrance of a king or a queen, usually performed in trumpet form, because the demonic objects, they're going
since how that's going on. How long do you think people on the internet is going to take this chapter and take the music and make that into an actual song? They not even gonna wait for the anime to finish.
Dun, da 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 dun, da 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 dun, da 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 da. And then finally, the king of the world arrives. Bang! And him just being here, it exudes another crazy blast of conqueror's haki that knocks out Colin and the rest of the kids. And then we spot a certain someone on the spire of Orist Castle. Someone who I don't think I ever expected to see, and definitely not like this, as we are introduced to the creator of the world government. One of the first 20 who possesses the ability of, quote, devil's fruit. The king of the world, Saint Imu Nerona. He also has a bit of blood dripping from his mouth, which I think Oda included to maintain and make obvious the idea that no matter how godly Imu looks here, he is suffering some pretty severe consequences. And I will say that even though it is technically a full design review, we don't get...
Oh no, that's badass. If you, I don't know if they're clouds. I think somebody said, I think it's clouds. It was like the Akatsuki cloud. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to, if Oda tried to throw a little bit of Naruto up in there.
An amazing look at the full design in this chapter. It's really too detailed to take in from a wide shot, and I'm looking forward to seeing some nice mid shots in the next chapter. But I love the black cloud of eyes above him. It's very Hellsing. And Imu, he's also adorned with some skulls and a cloak that appears to have his symbol on it, the same symbol that he uses on his followers via the Mark of the Abyss. Let's talk about the most obvious thing. We have the darker skin combined with the lighter hair, meaning that my first thought when I saw this face was, is Imu potentially a Lunarian? That's just thought number one though, because something that goes against it would obviously be the lack of wings, but also if we are going with a proper devil motif, as implied by the cartoonishly devil tail he has, same one that he used to stab Sabo during the Reverie by the way, but if we're going with that, then Imu's skin might end up being crimson devil red. Look, we're gonna do our best to guess the colors of Imu's design, but this is one of those situations where no one knows what Oda's going to do here. But the thing that intrigues me the most about Imu's design probably isn't something that anyone else cares about, but it is the belt. Primarily because it looks a lot like the belt that Loki wears.
I thought he was sitting on a snake for a second.
The one that Loki wore as a child, which is commonly thought to be inspired by Rock, since he also wore a similar belt, same style but different. However, I will say that Loki was wearing his belt long before he met Rock's. Now, with that said, I don't know if this is just a sort of design that Oda falls back on for comfort. He just likes it right now, or whether or not this actually means something, like a clear indication of being from an ancient world. Or in the case of Rocks, maybe inheriting an item of clothing from an ancient world, sort of like how Luffy now assumedly has Joy Boy's straw hat. Maybe Rocks inherited Davy Jones' attire, or perhaps the style of belt is just how gods used to dress back in the good old days. Although aside from the design, probably the most intriguing thing about Imu's introduction is his ability, which is just designated as Devil's Fruit. What even is that? Imu is not necessarily identified as being a Devil Fruit user, and if anything, I mean, we need to wait for the official translation to really dive properly into this, but at the moment it sounds to me like he has the ability to potentially create devil fruits. And if it is his special god power to conjure them, that just makes me so much more curious about his history.
So he's using his power against himself?
Represent the dreams of humanity. So if Imu was in any way responsible,
if that's true, is people are using Imu's power against Imu.
For that, then perhaps there is a world, maybe not the third world of One Piece, maybe the second or the first, where he wasn't such a bad guy. We do have some interesting linguistic notes. In Japanese, his ability is stated to be Akuma no Mi, which is the standard way that you say devil fruits, but it's the way that it's written which is quite important. Because in Imu's ability, the Akuma portion is written in katakana, and usually the Akuma part is written in kanji whenever devil fruits are mentioned. Now what that does is immediately identify Imu's ability as something foreign. But there's also a bit of a pun happening here, because if you take away the fruit kanji in devil fruit, the mi, and if you just write this as Akuma no Mi, then it means something more along the lines of only devils or nothing but devils. But puns are nothing new with Imu either. The Nerona name, when rearranged, can also create the word kami, meaning god, whilst Imu, I and Mu, can be read as 1 and 6, which is the holy number of the world government. The number 16 is very, very prominent in their culture, and so everything about how Emu is so meticulously detailed by Oda, and this design is just such a remarkable shift. A few months ago, we were looking at Emu being dressed in all sorts of kawaii strawberry outfits, and now just look how far we've come in such a short amount of time. And look, I am not done talking about Emu. There is so much more to dissect here, but for now, I want you to let me know what your thoughts.
Emu being a Lunarian, I want to see that. I want to see. But I love this video. Y'all gonna see this video, I guarantee y'all that. Ten out of 10 video. Second one of all time. I forgot what the first one was. I hope y'all enjoyed the video today. I'm gonna see how I get this out as fast as I can. See y'all later and goodbye.